As we enter into the 2024 season, it'll be the 100th for the New York Giants. It's NYG 100, and we're going to start it off with a series of talking about some different aspects of Giants history. And today, we're going to go into an interview we did a few years ago with Alan March about his great-grandfather, Dr. Harry March, and how football came to New York City thanks to the good doctor. Alan's coming up in just a second to tell us all about it.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Harry's continuing to get his name in the newspapers, writing letters to the editor about things. He's attending football games. He's living in an apartment building near Broadway. And he's talking to his mailman. Harry talks to everybody, especially journalists. And the mailman says, he would like to go see some college football games. And he's saying that because he's handing Harry a letter. In that letter were tickets to an upcoming Army game. His son, as a West Point cadet, could get those tickets. So Harry was getting those tickets. And he's talking about that to the mailman. Mailman says, I would love to get tickets, but I don't have any connections to college. I'm not a college man, but I want to go see the games. Besides, I work on Saturdays. Tickets are expensive anyway. What's a working guy to do? Harry thinks back to his days when he was in Canton. He remembers the Canton Bulldogs. He remembers when he was on the road with his theatrical troops. He stopped in and watched football games. He's watching baseball games. He's making commentary, getting his names in the papers. He's talking to team managers. He knows the talent that's out there. Harry's thinking, we can bring pro football to New York City. One of the guys Harry knew that he got to meet when he was traveling around Ohio and seeing these football games was a guy named Joe Carr. Joe Carr had been the manager of the Columbus Panhandles, a pro football team, and they were named for the Panhandle division of, I think, the Pennsylvania Railroad. And they were a pretty tough bunch of guys. I think six of them were the Nesser brothers, and they were all literally Boilermakers, and they had to have rock hard hands, and they were a tough team. Harry got to know Joe, a couple of Ohio guys. In about 1924, Harry thinks we can get a pro team in New York. Well, Joe Carr, by 1921, had become president of the American Professional Football Association. Carr becomes president, replacing Jim Thorpe, who had not done a very good job. Great name, great athlete, not a good administrator. Carr knew business. One of the first things that was done with Carr as president, they renamed the organization as the National Football League. Carr understands that for the league to truly become a national league, it needs to succeed in the big cities. Now, Chicago, it's got two football teams. It had the Bears and the Cardinals, but really the Big Apple was the place. He knew Harry. Harry knew football, and Harry says, give me a franchise. I'll find an angel. So Carr says, okay, and Harry starts looking. One of the first people he talked to was Tex Rickard. Now, Tex Rickard was huge in sports. He was a sports promoter. He recently had purchased the Madison Square Gardens. He was a fight promoter mostly. He was known as the greatest showman on earth, only for the boxing game. The New York Baseball Writers Association had its first annual banquet in January of 1924. Harry wrangled a ticket to there. He sees Tex Rickard and sits next to him down at the table and says, hey, Tex, I'm trying to get a pro football team together. You're a great promoter. You're willing to take on the big risk. How about it? And Rickard says, that's too big a risk for me. At that time, pro football was not a sure thing. So Rickard turned him down. Harry looks at a couple of other people, and finally he talks to a guy named Billy Gibson, who was also a boxing promoter, who managed Gene Tunney. Gene Tunney got really big. He was in the military, was boxing in World War I, and became a world champion after the war. So Harry contacts Billy Gibson, sets an appointment with him. This time he brings Joe Carr with him, mid-May, and they meet in Billy Gibson's office. And Harry, Joe Carr, and Billy Gibson are in the office, and they're saying, here's the vision. We want football to be as big as Major League Baseball. We envision teams in all the big cities. It's going to be big as baseball, maybe even bigger. And Gibson had once been involved with pro football. 1921, he had sunk about $20,000 into a team sponsored by a guy named Charlie Brickley. Brickley had been a star for Harvard in the late teens, was known for his kicking prowess. And so Brickley had tried starting a team in 1921. He called them Brickley's Giants. That lasted less than a year, and Billy Gibson lost all his money. So Gibson just didn't want to do it, but he said, what about my friend, Tim Mara? So somehow Mara gets in this office. We don't know if he was invited or just happened to walk in. And so they're telling Harry and Joe Carr are telling Tim Mara all about football. And Mara, he's a bookie. Being a bookie was legal in New York at that time. He's a sports promoter too. He had other businesses. He had a book bindery. He had a coal field. Mara was a businessman. He knew what he was doing. But Mara said, what's a franchise for this league cost? Harry said, $500. Mara says, a New York franchise for anything is worth $500. And he starts filling out a check. He hands the check over to Harry and he says, now that I've got a franchise, what do I do with it? I've never seen a football game. Harry just smiled and said, you leave that to me. Mara hired Harry, and the New York Giants were born.
Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.